Hey guys, welcome to another session of Epic 7. This is my initial thoughts video for Lionheart Cermia. I know that it's been a couple days in between my Piera video, but I wanted some time to digest it and also just to, imagine the scenarios I would use her if I would use her, and of course I will get through that. Anyways, let's talk about her. So first things first is the design. Obviously, I think that is a step up from the original, and it has been many years since the original Cermia was released. So I know that a lot of people were waiting for ML Cermia. She's always had those nice legs, although I have to say I was never really a fan of the fire version's legs. Like it never, yeah, sure, it was like the legs were long and stuff, but it wasn't that great. And I'm not a fan of the summer Cermia. So for those of you who may disagree with that already, you probably will already be biased into not liking this video since I already disagree on those points. But regardless, I do think that this version of Cermia does look a lot more mature in terms of like the way that the artists approach her. And obviously it's an ML, so realistically you gotta have that more finesse, more value. So I'm not too surprised at the design. This is part of the S3 animation. Looks pretty good. I actually want to, if I can pull her, I kind of want to do a breakdown video of her S3 animation, because I think that the storytelling there, the storyboard is really nice. It has a really nice sequence to it with some really good camera work. Of course, Epic 7 is really good for that. It reminds me of like LQC, but even LQC is a bit old now, so like this is like the next level. There is something that I did notice, of course, is that she is a light elemental hero, and she didn't have blonde hair. It was one of the things that I was always looking at in terms of like, if a character has blonde hair, they're most likely going to be light elemental. If they have white hair, then they can be dark. So ML Haste, Strays and stuff like that, and Designer Lilibet and stuff. But it is interesting that they're going with this. So like, it was kind of cool to see that. Like, I wouldn't have minded red hair, I wouldn't have mind, what is that, burgundy or whatever? I don't know what it's called, but like I wouldn't have minded that anyway. I wouldn't have commented saying, oh, that's not light elemental, that's not dark elemental. But the very fact that in the S3 animation her hair actually goes Super Saiyan, and there was actually a portion in it where it looked like she went Super Saiyan. So it's kind of cool. Like, I can really relate to this, and it really gives her that attitude. The red eyes with the red hair is a nice mix, but then once her hair goes blonde, it makes the eyes pop even more. So I really appreciate that aspect. Anyways, like I said, if I do pull her, I might make a little S3 animation breakdown video for it, just because I'm really inspired by it. I really like it. Her sword here is curved. I do remember that her sword in the RGB counterpart, hold on, I have the game actually open. I could actually double check here. I think it's straight edge. Yeah, it's a straight edge. I don't know why the change, and obviously this could be just a different, I mean, it's probably like more military or something. So someone who has like some kind of military background or whatever can probably correct me here. But of course her outfit does look more like an admiral or something like that. So maybe that's the kind of sword compared to what it looks like, kind of like a, I don't know, curved. I'm not quite sure. I'm not that good at sword lore, but it is not a straight edge, and I personally, as a preference, I prefer straight edged swords. But that's just a little thing. Those are little biases that I'm sharing here. Thigh wise though, she's definitely gained some more meat. To put it lightly, the original RGB Cermia, actually, you know what, I could probably bring it on screen here. Hold on, give me a sec. Did you see this? Like, yeah, just in my emulator here. So the original looked like a lot of people are like, oh, the legs look really good and stuff like that, but I'm like, yeah, like they're okay, but they're not like top model Luluka. So I like a bit of like, like bulk, just like the legs are stronger. I prefer that. You can see the detail in terms of the ML version, that there's those straps or whatever, and it's kind of like tying against the thighs, and so the thighs are kind of like indented. You can see that near the top there. And that's how you know that there's some muscle underneath that, and I like that. I think that's really, really nice. This is a new star sign again, and we are seeing this trend recently, and I think it's just because, you know, we're 3 years into the game, and it's about time we have some, not just change in mechanics, change in kits and stuff, but new stat lines to experiment. And I think that while Smilegate is designing this stuff, they're also experimenting. Now I'm gonna say this as part of the video here, so when you're watching this and it does happen, I'm not a prophet or anything, but it's sort of my prediction is that I think Lionheart Cermia is honestly almost like a test to see how they can buff Designer Lilibet. There are similarities that I can bring up, and then vastly very big differences as well. So it's not just because, like, you know, both are defense scaling bruisers, both are ML, both do AoE, therefore I'm saying that they're the same. I believe they're different enough, but I do believe that they're using Lionheart Cermia as a test bed to see where defense scaling bruisers will come into play in the meta, if they can even play in the meta. Comparably, you could say there is an aspect of Designer Lilibet in here. There's an aspect of even F Maya in here, even though F Maya is a knight. But it's just that all three of them, I don't know why, but all three of them coincidentally are defense scaling bruisers. We're talking about Designer Lilibet as well, and they all can self cleanse. Okay, so this is just something that is triggering me in terms of, like, you know, as a game designer. I'm thinking like they don't want to buff Designer a little bit too early. Either they over buff it because they don't know how she'll react, or they under buff it, and they don't want to do that. So I think that the design of Lionheart Cermia is different enough that okay, this is a unique hero, but at the same time it's also a test where, like, okay, this is a unique hero, so no one can complain like, oh, you gotta buff her, or you know, you didn't make her strong enough, because it's new, and we're really used to Epic 7 releasing characters that are new, and it's like kind of underwhelming. Unfortunately, she is an ML, so I have to say, like, you know, even though all of my summary right now is that, oh, she's kind of underwhelming, she's not that good, I have to say you have to try to pull for her, right? So I've explained this in other videos, but just in case you're new, for Epic 7, and the way it's going right now is like every single Mystic banner you should try to pull them. Regardless if you think they're good or not, you should try. And it's just more of like, whatever banner it is, hope you get lucky and you don't hit the pity. That's basically the play. Because the thing is, we don't know how, even if they're underwhelming on paper on release, we don't know how they'll react for real in like real tests, like World Arena and stuff like that. We can do predictions, and I think experienced players will predict it pretty closely to the reality. But the other side is that the buffs, right? So I mean, I don't have to say this, but the recent buff for ML Cowrick has proven to be one of the best buffs in terms of an ML5. Maid Chloe, when she got rebuffed, was also very, very dominant, and Maid Chloe is still pretty strong right now. But ML Cowrick is like the talk of the town. So like, if you had pulled ML Cowrick when he was released, then you're happy. If you were like me, and you know, you couldn't spare the currency because you were broke from the previous MLs, and you're just like, okay, he's underwhelming, I can't chase him, and then I missed him, and then now he's buffed. So you don't want that to happen in case Lionheart Cermia becomes good, right? But like I said, my prediction is that Lionheart Cermia is going to be a test to see what works as a defense scaling bruiser, and how they're going to be designing, or no pun intended, but how they're going to be redesigning or buffing Designer Lilibet. I think that's going to be the reason of Lionheart Cermia released the way she is. Alright, so anyways, back to this. So Pisces, she is the first Pisces warrior experimenting with new stat lines. As you can see there, it's not too shabby. The attack is at 966. I have Designer Lilibet stats open right beside me here. Both are warriors. And 975 is Designer Lilibet's, right? But Designer Lilibet has a lot more health, although slightly lower defense, but a lot more health. So in terms of EHP wise, Lionheart Cermia is just starting with a lower EHP. You can see there on screen, of course, Cermia's is 5663 in terms of health, speed is at 112, and defense is at 668. Whereas Designer Lilibet has 7054 health, so that's quite a lot in terms of EHP. Speed is 6 speeds slower, which is significant enough to, you know, separate them as like the speed tiers, quite big enough to separate them. And the defense is at 652 for Designer Lilibet. Both are at exactly 15% crit chance and 150% crit damage, and there is no effectiveness or effect resist on Designer Lilibet. So you can safely say that most likely there's 1 awakening extra on the health, and Lionheart Cermia has 2 of them that are in effect resist. Based on most awakenings, to get 30 effect resist, you need 2 awakenings to be effect resist. So that's probably where your HP is dipped. Now, this is a bold move in terms of like they don't, you know, even though she self buffs resistance, it is still a bit of a mechanical check. So in terms of like you can't control when she does it, which is unfortunate. To me it's unfortunate actually, but I know that they're trying to sell it as if it is fortunate. I don't think it's that fortunate. Both, I think this is notable, is that both are on imprint concentration of 16.8% crit rate, while both of them also have a 2-slot health increase, although they're different slots. Right, and that will be it in terms of my comparison to Designer Lilibet. I'm just gonna, you know, leave it there. But it is interesting that both of them are, you know, lacking crit rate innately and wanting that triple S for the crit chance. I don't know how I feel about that, because, you know, obviously they could have given Lionheart Cermia more crit rate, like innate, and it has nothing to do with the awakening. Awakenings can have crit chance. They can have any stat that they want, but they can also change the base stat to have, let's say, 18% crit rate, 21% crit rate, any starting crit rate. It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't have anything to do with the awakening, or it could, but they can change it. Anyways, long story short, this is kind of baity in terms of like you kind of want to max imprint this, right? So crit rate is a very, very good imprint. Speed is the best, but outside of Green Vildred, we haven't seen another self-speed imprinting, or even speed release, 5-star Nat 5. But crit rate is a pretty big one, and it's just like every single character now is crit rate self-imprint. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that? So I think Celine was as well. Designer Lilibet was. This one is as well. There's just a lot of characters that are just self crit rate. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean I'm okay with it. Like some whales will just pull for the imprints, and it is a good stat. It's just more of like, oh, well, that's unfortunate, you know, like missing 4 crit rate versus like, you know, 3% HP in terms of a self imprint is quite a big difference, you know what I mean? Anyways, so that's that. So our first Pisces with effect resist. Here we go in the kit. Skill 2, so it's far from over, gains 40 fighting spirit at the start of the first battle, and then after an ally suffers an extra attack, counter attack, or dual attack, dispels all debuffs inflicted on the caster and activates Shine. And then the effect after being attacked can only be activated once every 3 turns. Shine emits light, increasing defense, effect resistance of the caster for 2 turns, and gains 50 fighting spirit. So I feel like this like new buff, whatever, called Shine is almost not like, outside of it gaining the fighting spirit and maybe the combo of the buff, I feel like it's not a really cool mechanic. I almost think that like the reading could have just been, you know, after suffering extra attack, counter attack, dual attack, increases the defense and the effect resistance. But why does it have to go under a name? It doesn't matter. I mean, they do this sometimes, but I'm just curious where they're going with this. For me, this is like a flag of like, again, them trying to work out what they want defense scaling bruisers to do, which is kind of interesting. So it's like, I feel that Lionheart Cermia, if you were watching this video and even before, you probably had seen the skills, you're watching it for like a second opinion or whatever, you probably felt the same thing I did. It's like, well, she's kind of underwhelming. But this is the other aspect that I'm bringing with you to you guys, right? So I do believe she's experimental. Okay, she's not just underwhelming. I believe she's experimental. So anyways, so increase the defense, that's great. So this is something that Designer Lilibet lacks. She has no ability to grant self-defense buff, whereas F Maya could. Again, using these as an example to compare Lionheart Cermia's effectiveness in terms of the meta or what have you. The effect resistance buff, of course, is necessary in my opinion, just because she already has that ER, and it's obviously that like they're building towards something more different, which is kind of interesting. So at the same time, you have the self ER buff, but then you can dispel all debuffs. So it's almost like a conflict, right? So like to me when I see that, it's just like, okay, you would arguably say that, oh, maybe you have up to 100 effect resistance. Maybe you put on Strat Gauntlet as her main artifact. So Strat Gauntlets give 60 when you're like above a certain HP threshold, and then plus the 30, you have about 90, right? So let's say 100, and you find some substats. You get 100 ER, but then you're debuffed. I guess it's only to prevent a second debuff after the first debuff had happened. And again, the check is a mechanical check, and this mechanical check could really screw you over. So let me just explain that with the next screenshot here. Like I said, extra attack, counter attack, or dual attack. Okay, so like you have to be in a very, very controllable fight to be able to predict that happening. Okay, so this is like in terms of like the screenshot or in their video. Oxlot has just pushed up Cermia, so she has 100% CR, okay? And then Politis does her Astral Guide and then hits her. I don't think she even dispelled, like in terms of like in the video. I don't think they like proc Abyssal Crown or whatever, but if it did proc Abyssal Crown, you would be dispelled, okay? And then you have your defense buff, and then you have your attack buff from Oxlot, and then you have your resistance buff. And I think like Politis didn't reduce the attack buff, as you can see there. It's still 2 turns on Cermia. So like, but like what happens when you, I don't know. This is so to me, this is like a mechanic that you cannot predict, and you cannot rely on in terms of getting her turn to be cleansed. You know what I mean? How should I explain this? The other aspect is that the skill 2 is a non-attack skill. So the skill 2 itself would already be proccing Politis. Okay, would already be proccing Politis. But in this example, Politis procced on Oxlots. But let's say something had happened where someone dual attacked on first turn. Your opponent dual attacked on the first turn, right? So that's one of the mechanical checks here, dual attack. And then you proc Cermia, and then the Politis goes off. But then at the same time, you'd be like, oh yeah, then she's fine. She won't get, she won't get stunned. She won't get debuffed, even if Politis did go in that case. But this is where I'm just like, how can you rely on that? What if it's a effectiveness build Politis with Abyssal Crown? And what if it has so much effectiveness and you don't have enough effect resist? And so to me, this is like another aspect. Designer Lilibet's cleanse aspect was like, you had to ensure that none of your heroes were resisting, for one, to be able to get the cleanse on the turn that you want to cleanse the entire team, which is also one of the failures or the downfalls of when I reviewed originally Designer Lilibet. And so I feel the same way here. It's just that there are 3 mechanics, and while at the same time these mechanics are great, it's almost like she's trying to be Pillis, so a specialty change Pillis with those mechanics, but Pillis does more to counter those. Like in terms of, if these happen to Cermia, all you get is the defense buff, the cleanse, and the effect resist, but also only for herself. And then the question would be, is she enough to carry the rest of the team? So let's say if everybody else was stunned, and in this case, okay, so she's on Abyssal Crown, Oxlot's pusher, everyone else was stunned except her, then Designer Lilibet technically would be a better choice there. But then does Cermia have the chops to be able to beat it? Then if you're saying, well, Jagan, it doesn't always have to be the case, like it doesn't always have to be in that scenario that you use Cermia. And I would say I agree, but that's also my issue. It's like, then what is this? What is this for? Okay, so this is where I'm kind of confused. The cleanse is great, like I said, cleansing, having ability to cleanse off a skill is always good. So look at Ambitious Tywin. But Ambitious Tywin got reworked in the case of that, like if anybody got touched on a debuff, they would cleanse that first turn. This is activated once every 3 turns. So that's including everything on top in terms of the Dispel as well, and Shine. So that is a long turn thing. So that is the exact same problem as Dilibet's cleanse. Even though Dilibet can like cleanse AoE, you're at the mercy of very long cooldowns, and then not be able to control it. And in Cermia's case, it's like you can't really control it either. But if you do, then what are you gonna do, right? Like if your whole team is stuck, what are you gonna do? So in terms of this slot, all right, if we look at this clearly, the slot of ML Cermia at the moment, her next skill is most likely going to be an AoE, because you want that defense pen, you want the S3, you want the defense pen while her defense buff is up. But is that enough to kill? All right, that's a big question as well. I do have her damage mods. I have the damage calculator open as well, so I'll be reading my findings from that as well. So anyways, that's it for skill 2. I don't know if I'm missing anything else actually. Yeah, we talked about this as a non-attack skill, so it procs Politis. 3 turns, too long. Self-defense buff is good. Self-cleanse is always good. Effect resistance only forces you to play her into that one style, which I don't necessarily like. I don't necessarily like that force. It's kind of like ML Ken when he got his buff, and it's like he got more ER innate. It's like, okay, so you obviously built ER ML Ken, but look at ML Ken right now. There are still too many strong debuffers out there that even ML Ken can't resist it. I feel that it's the same thing for Cermia. Even with the buff, by the way, even with the buff. And then if you do, then you're going to be lacking other things like HP, survivability, damage, and then it's just like it's tearing you into different positions, different directions, and it's just not enough. Gain 50 fighting spirit as well for Shine, so plus the 40 innate at the start of the battle, that would be equal 90 if it procs. Okay, the S3 has to consume 80 fighting spirits, as you can see on the top there. So this is not a skill cooldown skill, but it is still based on fighting spirit. So who does that remind you of again? Kind of like Designer Lilibet, right? Kind of like Designer Lilibet, on a different emphasis in terms of the focus there. But it's still important to know that it is still based on the fighting spirit. Right? I said focus, I meant fighting spirit. Attacks all enemies with the sword storm, and then before granting an extra turn to the caster, penetrates the target's defense by 50%, and then damage dealt increases proportion of the caster's defense. One of my guildmates was making a very, very good comment. He did an RTA fight and he lost with F Cleary, in terms of F Cleary didn't land the debuff that he needed to secure that first turn. And then he's just like, WTF, like what the heck, like they should just bring back F Cleary's like random extra turn. Now I know that he's kind of half joking, but he's probably not joking either, and he's making a good point. What he means is that everybody has an extra turn now. Remember maybe like four months ago, it was like Epic 7's design to have everybody have self CR boost on S1, and like for that to be good. Now apparently it's everybody needs an extra turn. So I mean, it is pretty crazy how much of those extra turn heroes that we've got in just the last 6 months, right? We got Ran, we got ML Cermia, we have Conqueror Lilius. Was that Piera also has it too? So yeah, if you're rolling your eyes, I don't blame you. I'm at this point where I'm just like, I can't roll my eyes anymore because my eyes would just come out. But it is like, it's like, come on, right? But at the same time, it's just like, we understand, like, we don't want too many new mechanics also in the game, because then you can't really catch up, right? New mechanics dictate that there are probably other counter mechanics. And while a lot of people will be like, well, I could design the game better, you might not be a game designer. I do know that it is pretty difficult, especially when you are releasing characters. And I think every single game that has multiple characters and, you know, newly released characters and stuff like that, you're always going to run into this issue. But this goes to the more underlying issue, is that their balancing has to be done better, right? It has to be done better in my opinion. And that's all I will say about that here. The skill 3, it is, on paper it is impressive. I ran into the damage calculator. I don't know if I did some wrong setting, but it doesn't look as impressive as you might think. At least to me, alright? It might still be crazy, actually, to be honest. Actually, no, you know what? It is actually good damage. It is still good damage. I had to think about it in terms of like an RB cleave or BBK cleave or something like that. It is still pretty decent damage, okay? So attacks all enemies of Sword Storm and then grants an extra turn to the caster. Penetrates the target's defense by 50%, right? So this is the AOE, and then damage out proportional to the caster's defense. There is more raw damage here, as you can see. There's 10, 20, 30, 40 raw damage. All the skill enhances pretty much on the S3 and the S1. Since the S2 only had one skill, which I believe this will take your 3 mola or something like that for these skills. It takes quite a bit, but either way, that's not that important. I have the damage calculator open, so I wanted to give you guys some numbers, rough numbers to work with. So I have set Lionheart Cermia's attack to be 2000. When I built Designer Lilibet, they had similar base attacks. Designer Lilibet, I had around 1800 attack with like 2200 defense. So I gave Lionheart Cermia, let's say 2000 attack. That might be a bit high because you would actually be wasting a lot of attack rolls into there for 900-ish base attack to be able to reach 2000. So I'm just giving it more stats in the damage calculator, more than you would actually have on Lionheart Cermia. Okay, let me just say that right now. I have the crit damage set to 250. Realistically, you should be able to hit 280 to 300, especially if you have self-imprint. So actually, let me just crank that up to 300, okay? So 2000 attack, 300 crit damage. I am not increasing attack on Lionheart Cermia on purpose, just because I don't believe that will always be a possibility, especially when you are using Lionheart Cermia, okay? The target or the opponent's defense is at 1500. I always like to set that to 1500 as the base model. And then we have caster's defense at 2000 plus increased defense. So in my theory craft for the damage calculator, I'm assuming that I've somehow triggered my self defense buff, or maybe got a defense buff outside of her, okay? Skill enhance is all maxed in my damage calculator, and then the S3 does 9942 damage on this target. Now this target does not have things like damage reduction or Aureus, okay? So this is on a 1500 defense hero. Your S3, it's an AoE. Remember, it does pen, defense pen up to 50%. 9942. That's not too bad, right? So when my RB gabs and hits a 1500 defense hero, it does about maybe 10,000 damage max. All right, my RB is not too bad. It's like 4k attack, 300 crit damage. But if I soul burn it, and especially if it's full focus soul burn, then it does more. But let's not count that. Let's count like a first turn cleave. So RB being that, like, 300 crit damage, 4000 attack with a gab. So that's a 75% of the 4000. That's quite a lot of damage. And it only does like 10,000. So the 50% defense pen is definitely doing its work here, carrying that number pretty high. The S3 damage mod, I think we have here, is a 0.3 attack rate. So it's very, very low compared to someone like F Maya. It's super low. I think F Maya is, let me take a look here. F Maya's S3 is a 1 times mod, and if you soul burn, it's a 1.7 times attack mod with 150% self defense, and Lionheart Cermia is at 135 self defense. Okay, 135% self defense. So the defense scaling is lower than F Maya, but it's understandable. F Maya is a single target damage, Lionheart Cermia is AoE damage, but the attack rate is much lower on Cermia at 0.3. So definitely do not chase attack at all on Lionheart Cermia, whereas F Maya, you can actually argue having a 1 times mod there, having a bit of attack that's spare would make her really, really strong. All right. So, and then let's talk about The S1. Okay, so you're granted an extra turn if you do it, and that would mean that you have to have the souls to be able to do the S3. So you have to keep that in mind. It's not a cooldown skill. You can't just unleash it on turn 1. You need to be gaining the fighting spirit. If no one triggers your S2, you aren't gaining that 50 fighting spirit. You need 80, right? So that means you need 2 S1s in order to get your first S3. Okay? You need 2 S1s in order to get your first S3. So does that mean I have her on counter? Would that ensure it more? I know that was the thing about Designer Lilibet as well. It's like, oh, if she's on counter, she'd be pretty good too, because gain fighting spirit, and gaining fighting spirit will increase her gauge, and she'll self-cleanse, self-CR boost. That's how Designer Lilibet works. Same question here, like could it be used there? Maybe. She has high base speed, but maybe you want this to scale off a speed set. Who knows, right? And then let's see here. So attacks enemy with the sword, increase speed to the caster for 1 turn, and increased damage also dealt by the caster's defense. So proportional caster defense. And I think here we have another 40. So 10, 20, 30, yeah, 40% raw damage. So 7 on both S1, S3, both 40 raw damage. You know, that sounds pretty impressive, but that doesn't matter because they can always change the damage mods, which unfortunately we do have sort of low damage mods on Lionheart Cermia's S1. Attack rate is at a 0.6, and the soul burn will give it a 1x mod. Again, I'm gonna compare to F Maya because F Maya is more known as the like really strong defense scaling bruiser in terms of damage defense scaling bruiser. F Maya's attack rate for the S1 is 0.5, and it's a 75% self defense. And Lionheart Cermia is a 0.6, so slightly higher. Soul burn equals 1, which is pretty high, and it's at a 100% self defense and 160% soul burn. So this is something I want to highlight here. I definitely think that her soul burn S1 is no joke. So according to the same damage calculator with the same stats, which is, again, let me just read it: 2000 attack, 300 crit damage, no attack buff against a target or opponent of 1500 defense. Your defense is 2000 base with a defense buff. On the S1 with those stats, you are doing 5186 on a critical hit. That's without soul burn, and then the soul burn is 8393. I almost feel that Lionheart Cermia could potentially be using a pen set, and although you will only be using that on the S1, it's just giving her that extra push in terms of the damage. Unless you want to run immunity or even if crit set, I guess. But if you have triple S, you probably don't need to run a crit set. If you are running a crit set, you are significantly like adding other stats, and I'm not sure what other stats she needs, maybe outside of HP, because I believe that defense, you know, is great. But this is the issue with defense scaling, is that outside of the defense buff, you can't really increase the damage more. I guess vigor buff with Conqueror Lilies in the mix, I think that can work too. So stacking defense and vigor. But the soul burn, like I said, with those damage mods, you can do up to 8393 damage compared to the S3, which has a 50% defense pen, although the mods are different, 994. So you're not too off. So if I put a pen set on, I'm just clicking that on the damage calculator. If I click on a pen set, you have a pen set completed. Her soul burn S1 becomes so much closer to the S3. It's actually impressive. It becomes 9591 damage versus the S3 being 9942 damage. So it's only like about 400 damage difference, even less. So it's actually pretty impressive. So something to consider if you are thinking about her build. Maybe a pen set with ER or whatever. It won't be bad. So like those pen sets with ER that you save for ML Ken, maybe this could work for her too. With a vigor buff stacked with everything, you're looking at about 11,000 damage on both the S1 and the S3. So soul burn S1. So I think outside of like just the kit being more confusing, the damage is impressive, right? So like when I'm doing my initial thoughts, I'm always trying to do somewhat of an objective look, even though I have some subjective opinions. Overall, I do not believe that she is a must pull at this point. In terms of if you expect to use her to some kind of crazy theory craft, I don't believe she's going to do it. I definitely do feel, in summary, I definitely do feel that she gives me the same issues as Designer Lilibet. When I released my Designer Lilibet video, Designer Lilibet, I feel like her purpose was more clear, and it was mainly like because Guild War was dominated by Cerisef Tenny. Once Designer Lilibet was like released, that defense pretty much died off. But I don't know. I think some people said that her design is like against C Lilius or whatever. I'm not quite sure about that myself, because it does depend on. I mean, she has the dual attack, so in terms of like C Lilius has the dual attack, or they have a Polytus on the team, or something like that. It just again, I feel that her flaws is that she's locked to mechanical circumstances, and the dual attack is honestly the most annoying part in this, because the dual attack, everyone who does World Arena, I mean heck, any PvP, you can get triggered by the amount of dual attacks that happen that is just uncalled for in terms of unpredicted. This is what I feel that is going to be the downfall of her. It's not the extra attack, it's not the counter attack, because those in a way you can sort of expect it, but the dual attack is at a 5% rate, but dual attacks can happen a lot, and so that could make things worse. See, I don't like any character that requires RNG to be on your side, and do you expect them to be like insanely good, right? So outside of that, I mean, the speed buff was designed to be, you know, giving her more turns, and therefore she could do S3 more often. I definitely think that she's lacking something. So honestly, that's all I can comment on. But if you guys have differing opinions, of course, leave it down in the comments down below, and I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Whether you agree or disagree, it doesn't matter. I always read the comments. And yeah, if you guys are ever on Twitch and you want to chill while I'm streaming or something, definitely stop by, and I'll be happy to have you. Outside of that, I'm gonna end the video for the recording here. If you guys have Discord, check out the Discord server, follow me on Twitter, subscribe to YouTube if you haven't. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.